Hello, welcome to Oxford Heirlooms. In this video, we're going to begin to create the fancy panel for the front bodice of the bubble. Now, I've got my piece of green imperial batiste sitting over here, which will go on the sides of the fancy panel. And we will insert the fancy panel into the batiste in the next video, but not today. So let me put that piece of batiste off to the side. And I've got my lace and got my insertion pieces sitting around here. I've got my middle wide Swiss insertion. Now, once again, this has both a front side and a bobbin side. So you need to look at it carefully. And I always write the word top, T-O-P, because the letter T is symmetrical. And I want to be able to keep track of what's the top and what's the front. Okay, so I will insert a piece of Malin lace next to it, followed by my Swiss beading, followed by another piece of insertion lace, and then finally I will put a piece of entredeaux on the end of it so that I can attach it to the batiste. And then before I sew the shoulder seams, which will come a little bit later, I will weave my silk ribbon into the beading. Okay, so let me put a few things off to the side and we'll begin working on the fancy panel. Okay, so I'm going to put my entredeaux off to the side, my extra piece of Malin lace, my beading, and I'm going to start with one piece of Malin lace, which is about the length, but maybe not quite, but that's okay. I've got a little more Swiss insertion than what I need. Okay, now I've got to be careful with my Malin lace because it's one-sided. If you look at this, can you see those little fuzzies on one side? So I need to make sure that I orient my Malin lace where the top side is with the top side of the Swiss insertion. Okay, now the first thing I need to do before I can get started is I need to trim some of the excess batiste away from my Swiss insertion on one side, because I'm going to do one side at a time. There we go. Okay, now I have my sewing machine. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. I've got my sewing machine set for a zigzag and the appropriate stitch length and stitch width for sewing entredeaux. So I'm going to begin to zigzag my piece of Malin lace. If you'll notice, this particular Swiss edging has entredeaux built into it. So I'm going to zigzag it to the built-in entredeaux. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I'm going in an entredeaux hole and not stabbing the entredeaux ladder. Get my lace butted up right next to it. And I will begin to zigzag. Okay, this will take me a minute to get to the end of this panel, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got my first piece of insertion lace attached to my wide Swiss insertion in the center. I'm not going to start working on the other side yet because one thing that you know, if you look at this carefully, this Moline lace has a very distinct pattern. And what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to create mirror image patterns on both sides of the lace. And so I need to insert my beading next to this. Now, if you'll notice, this beading has built-in entree also. So I'm going to use my embroidery scissors and trim one side of the batiste away, and then I will proceed to zigzag this beading next to my piece of insertion lace. There. Oops, got a little holiday right here. A little bit I failed to clip off. Okay, now since I like to sew with my entree on the left rather than the right, I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to sew or zigzag my beading to my insertion lace, basically from the bottom up. Okay, so let me first make sure that I'm going in an entree hole and not stabbing the entree ladder. Okay, I'm in. And then we'll begin to zigzag this lace into place. Let me see if I can zoom in again. Okay, this will take me a minute to get down to the end of this panel, but I'm just going to continue to zigzag until I get to back up to the top. Okay, I've got that first piece of beading sewn onto the beginning of the the fancy panel. Now, before I sew the next piece of insertion lace, I'm going to use my little drafting triangle. I'm going to line up with the side of the batiste of the wide Swiss insertion, and then I'm going to line up halfway between one of the lace motifs, and I'm going to draw a line all the way across what I have created of the panel so far. Including the beading, because not only am I going to want to line up the motifs on this side, I want to line up my beading on both sides also, so that when we look at the fancy lace panel, the laces and insertions open up like a book or butterfly wings, and we'll work on that. Okay, so let me get my next piece of Moline. Well, first thing I need to do is I need to trim the excess batiste away from my piece of beading. And then we'll get our next piece of Moline lace. and get it lined up so that it turns out to be symmetric, or it'll be lined up with the first piece of Moline lace. There. Okay, now once again, I have to inspect my lace. That's the fuzzy side, so this is the top side. And what I'm going to want to do, I'm going to want my motif, my two motifs are going to open up like books on this side. So they're not going to be the same motif from side to side. They're going to be opposite motifs. So I'm going to, with my fabric marking pen, I'm going to draw a line, let's see, halfway through that motif. So I know to line that up right there when I begin to zigzag it on. Okay, all right. Now let's see, since I've already, I want to make sure I'm lined up coming from the bottom so it lines up all the way to the top. So I'm going to turn this over and zigzag it from the back side, I think. See if I can zoom in. Get my lace lined up where it needs to be lined up. Make sure I'm going in an entredot hole and not stabbing the entredot ladder. There we go. And I will begin to zigzag this lace into place. Okay, now once again, this is going to take me a minute to get down to the other end of this panel, and I'm just zigzagging, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I have my second piece of insertion lace sewn on, and as you can see, the motifs are mirror images of each other and on the insertion lace. And we've started this blue line down near the bottom, and we will continue that blue line over here on the other side when we get to it. But what I need to do to finish this side is I need to sew a piece of entredot onto the edge of the insertion lace. So let me trim the excess batiste away from my entredot ladder on my piece of entredot. And then we'll start zigzagging it into place. Let me get my threads out of the way. Okay, once again, I'm going to butt my laces up, and I'm going to drop my needle to make sure I'm going in an entredot hole, and not stabbing the entredeux ladder. There we go. And I will begin to zigzag this entredeux to the insertion lace. And then we'll be finished with one side of the fancy panel. Okay, now I need to finish zigzagging along this edge, so I'll be right back. Okay, now that completes one side of the fancy lace panel. Now we'll begin to work on the other side, and eventually we will weave the piece of silk ribbon into the beading, and then sew the panel to the Neptune green Imperial Batiste. But we're not quite ready to do that. We need to build the other side of the insertion. So I'm going to begin to trim away my excess batiste from the other side of my wide Swiss insertion using my embroidery scissors. Just cut off the excess batiste close to that built-in entredeux ladder that the Swiss insertion has. Okay, now I have to pay close attention because I'm going to want my motifs once again to open up like a book. Now, I've got to identify the front and back of the Moline lace. And as you can see, this is the fuzzy side and this is the not fuzzy side. So let me line up the motif to where it is halfway at that blue line, and it's facing the motif over here on the other side. So I'm going to, with my blue fabric marking pen, I'm going to draw a line halfway through that motif so that I can line it up when I begin to sew. Okay, we'll come over here to the sewing machine. Line up the blue line so we've got our motifs lined up. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see this. And I'm going to hold the lace next to the entredeux. I'm going to drop my needle, make sure I'm going in an entredeux ladder and not stabbing the entredeux rung. Make sure my lace is lined up real nicely. And we'll begin to zigzag this lace to the built-in entredeux of the Swiss insertion. Okay, this will take me a minute to get all this zigzagging done, so I'll be right back. Okay. Okay, so I have the first piece of insertion lace sewn onto the other side, and I'm going to bring my next piece of beading. I've cut a piece that's long enough, and I'm going to line it up with the first piece of beading. Let's see. And then using my blue fabric marking pen, I'm going to draw a little blue line through the beading so that I can make sure that I line my beading up from side to side also, because not only do I want the lace motifs to be level from side to side and open up like a book, I want my beading ribbon to mirror image itself also. So I'm going to cut one side, I'm going to trim away the excess batiste from one side of my beading, my Swiss beading, and then we'll proceed to line this up and zigzag it together. I need to trim that just a little bit more. I've got a little bit of a holiday right here. There we go. Okay, so we're going to line this up right here and sew it on. So since I like to sew with my entre-deux to the left, I'm going to sew from this side. Let me see if I can zoom in to the machine again. Okay, line up my blue lines, but the entre-deux, the built-in entre-deux up to the lace. Then I need to check to make sure I'm going in an entre-deux hole and not stabbing the entre-deux ladder. Okay, all right, so now we're ready to zigzag this into place. You know, I spend so much time lining this up because it ends up being a much nicer look than if you simply just insert the lace willy-nilly. You know, like matching up patterns, like matching up patterns in wallpaper, uses more materials, but I think that the outcome is well worth the price of the couple of inches of materials that you may end up putting in the trash can. Okay, so this will take me a minute to zigzag all the way down this side, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I have the second piece of beading, and you can see, you know, it lines up from side to side. Like I said, I think it's just important to try to line it up as opposed to just doing this willy-nilly. Okay, now let me trim my excess batiste away from this beading, and then we will proceed to line up our next piece of insertion lace and zigzag it on. Just trim it close to the entre-deux ladder without cutting the ladder itself. Embroidery scissors are really good for this because they're small and they're sharp, and you can maintain control over what you're doing. Okay, so I've got my piece of Malin lace. Once again, I've got to, let's see, that's the fuzzy side, so it's got to go down this way. And I want my motifs this time to open up like a book from side to side. So let me draw a line in this motif right here, because this is the one that I want to line up. And then we'll come back over here to the sewing machine and butt the lace up to itself, lining up the blue line. First, make sure we're going in an entre-deux hole and not stabbing an entre-deux ladder. Okay, we're going in the hole. Let's see if I can zoom in again. And just proceed to zigzag this lace and entre-deux together. Okay, so I'll be right back because I just need to finish this zigzagging. Okay, we are almost finished creating the fancy lace panel for the front of the bubble. So I need to sew another piece of entre-deux to the edge. So let me trim my excess batiste away from my entre-deux ladder, and then we'll zigzag this on. Just come back over here to the sewing machine and zoom back in again. Okay, now I'm going to butt my lace up to my entre-deux and make sure I'm going in an entre-deux hole and not stabbing an entre-deux ladder. Okay, that works. And we'll proceed to zigzag the entre-deux to the insertion lace. Okay, this will take me a minute to get this zigzagged all the way down. All right, that completes our fancy lace panel. And in the next video, we will insert it into our rectangle of Neptune green Swiss batiste and cut out the pattern piece. And then we will weave the silk ribbon into the beading. And I think that that's going to look just really, really precious for our little redhead. Okay, all right. So in this video, we were creating the fancy lace panel. And some of the things that we did was we were very careful to create mirror image insertions on both sides of the wide Swiss insertion in the center. We used a blue line to line up our motifs and line up our beading from side to side. And I think that that worked out really, really well. Okay, thank you.